The medieval age was filled with unique jobs and positions, all varying in importance, prestige, and social status. Besides prestigious positions like knights and kings were also less prestigious positions like toilet scrubbers or jesters. Most people associate jesters with stupid costumes, low intelligence, and a life that only consists of being mocked by their lord. In reality, the position of the court jester played an important role in court and came with a lot of perks that many people aren't aware of. So today we'll take a look at the actual life of court jesters and try to answer the question of whether or not the position of court jester was overpowered. Before we can answer this question, we first have to take a brief look at the history of court jesters. While court jesters were present in every major culture around the world, our modern stereotype of them is based on their appearance in medieval Western society. Back then, they were called buffoons or fools and were members of the household of a nobleman or a monarch employed to entertain guests during the medieval and Renaissance eras. Jesters were also itinerant performers who entertained common folk at fairs and town markets. When it comes to defining a court jester, there were two major groups, the natural fools and the artificial fools. Natural fools consisted of people who were deemed mentally defective or as having a deficiency in their education. They were treated similarly to freak shows during the 19th century and stood as someone for the rest of society to laugh at. In our modern worldview, making fun of disabled or mentally ill people would be considered cruel, but back then people even saw this act as a positive one, as these natural comedians were not typically able to have a job or earn any sort of living on their own. The second group, artificial fools, is what most people in modern times imagine when they hear the word jester, someone who comes up with witty and original jokes to entertain a royal court. Entertainment included music, storytelling, and physical comedy. Fool societies or groups of nomadic entertainers were often hired to perform acrobatics and juggling. The main difference between the two groups is that a natural fool's comedy is not done intentionally, while an artificial fool's is. Now that we understand the history of court jesters, let's take a look at the many perks they received for their seemingly shameful position. One perk that came with this position was the jester's privilege, the ability and right of a jester to talk and mock freely without being punished. This was especially common with natural jesters who used this so-called natural fool's gift to speak the unbridled truth to their lords. Even Martin Luther used jest in many of his criticisms against the Catholic Church and called himself a court jester, and in many of his texts, he explicitly invokes the jester's privilege. However, while they were far more free to say whatever they wanted, jesters still had to be tactful and not too blunt when making their jokes. One famous jester who learned that the hard way was Will Somers, who was the best-known court jester of Henry VIII of England. He was well loved by Henry and his family, but on some occasions, Somers' jokes were so blunt that King Henry threatened to kill him. For example, in 1535, Somers joked that one of Henry's children was a bastard, which was one of the worst insults in medieval times. Many other jesters went too far with their jokes and ended up being exiled, beaten up, or even killed. For example, the French jester Jean Moreau was known for insulting everyone around him, which ended with him getting beaten and receiving death threats multiple times. When he mocked the wife of King Francis, he even was sentenced to death, but managed to save himself hilariously. Because of his long and loyal service, King Francis let him choose how he wanted to die, so Jean simply answered, "From old age." The king liked this joke so much that he spared the jester's life and simply banished him. In conclusion, jesters were expected to comment on any decision or action their lord made in a jolly way, but if they wanted to keep their position and their life, they had to be tactful about it. Usually, jesters weren't very wealthy, and in most cases, they didn't even have an official salary. However, they were exceptionally taken care of and lived a life far above that of a common citizen in medieval times. In exchange for their service, they were compensated with an immense amount of food and good shelter, oftentimes even inside the royal castle. On top of that, they were often rewarded by the wealthy people they were entertaining and received massive tips. For example, Tom the Fool was once awarded 50 shillings, which was usually a full year's salary, for the excellent performance he had given. However, those rewards weren't just money. An exceptionally good jester could even be rewarded with royal titles or land. For example, King Henry II once awarded 30 acres of land to his retired jester Roland Le Péteur, thereby practically granting him a title of nobility. However, as part of the deal, Roland had to return to court once per year to leap, whistle and fart for the king's amusement. And yes, medieval humour is basically internet humour with fancier language. Moreover, since jesters spend so much time with their lords, they usually became their trusted advisors and thereby gained some political power and influence. They would often use their position of power to secure lucrative jobs or deals for close friends and family members. So jesters weren't rich from a monetary standpoint, but in medieval times it was already luxurious to have enough food and a roof over your head, and their other perks were just a welcomed bonus for them. Another interesting part about jesters is that they surprisingly were one of the more progressive jobs of their time. In a period where women didn't have many rights, female jesters enjoyed all the same perks as their male counterparts. Just like male jesters, they were allowed to make fun of the people around them, including powerful men, which was usually an absolute taboo at the time. The position of jester wasn't stigmatized or associated with one gender. Instead, every jester held the same responsibilities and gained the same perks, no matter what their gender was. One famous example of a female jester was Mathurine de Valois, also known as Mathurine La Foy, who served at the court of French kings Henry III, Henry IV, and Louis XIII, successively. She was known for her extravagant costume as an Amazonian warrior, complete with a shield, armor, and a wooden sword. She was known for her sharp wit and that she made jokes about everyone regardless of their position, even kings and queens. One of them was an occasion in which a lady-in-waiting complained that she did not like having a fool at her right side, upon which Mathurine jumped to the lady's other side and announced, "I don't mind it at all."
Are you all right? Yes. No, you are all left.
Mathurine was also considered a hero at the court after she saved the king in 1594 when Henry IV was wounded by the assassin Jean Châtel and arrested him herself. Witnesses describe the event as follows. Mathurine it was who arrested the youth who attempted to assassinate Henry IV on the 28th of December. This youth, who had glided into the apartment unperceived, struck at the king with his dagger. "Devil takes that fool with her tricks," cried his majesty. Mathurine sprang to the door and, barring the passage, prevented the escape of the king's assailant. Mathurine is noted for the last time in the court of Louis XIII in 1627, and no one knows what happened to her afterwards. As the 17th century progressed, people began to see jesters as inferior and shameful forms of entertainment in the Western world. Now, people preferred public theatres, operas, and other performing houses, which were seen as superior and prestigious forms of entertainment. In the 18th century, jesters had died out except in Russia, Spain, and Germany. In France and Italy, travelling groups of jesters performed plays featuring stylized characters in a form of theatre called the Commedia dell'arte. A version of this passed into British folk tradition in the form of a puppet show, Punch and Judy, and in France the tradition of the court jester ended with the French Revolution. In the 21st century, the jester has been revived and can still be seen at medieval-style fairs and pageants. So with all this information, we have to decide whether or not the position of jester was overpowered. In my opinion, the jester wasn't inherently overpowered, even though he had access to high quantities of food, a good home, and was even in contact with the ones in power. However, we have to consider that all those perks and even their lives could be lost in an instant if a stupid jester makes one joke about the wrong person. Moreover, many jesters were only qualified for their position by their natural disabilities, meaning that they were already dealt a bad hand since birth. Based on that, I would say that the power of a jester was highly dependent on their skill and intelligence. A sharp-witted and intelligent jester could definitely be considered overpowered, since they were able to obtain high-ranking court positions by simply telling a few stupid jokes. As loyal advisors to kings, they were able to partake in political decisions and were often able to use their influence for their own benefit. The best jesters even managed to claim titles of nobility and rose to become the same kind of lord they had once served. In conclusion, I do consider jesters to be somewhat overpowered, since even a bad jester would lead a very secure life, and skilled jesters were even able to access a level of luxury similar to that of medieval rulers. So while they were certainly not the most overpowered position, they are certainly up there, and I would put them in a solid A tier. I hope I was able to give you interesting insights into one of the weirder jobs from the medieval ages. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.